Welcome back to another explainer. So, have you ever wondered why two candidates with, incredibly similar qualifications can send out their CVs, but only one of them gets that call for an interview? We usually think of our CV as this completely objective inventory of our skills and experiences, right? But what if it's not? What if snagging that decent job isn't just about the hard facts on the page, but actually about the highly subjective psychological inferences those facts trigger in the reader's mind? Today, we are diving deep into three absolutely fascinating research papers from Portugal that reveal how evaluators truly read between the lines of your resume. Here's our roadmap for today. First, we'll look at the subjective CV. Then, grades versus extracurriculars. Next up, the internship illusion. Fourth, demographics and discrimination. And finally, crafting the perfect signal. Let's get right into it. Section 1. The subjective CV and the psychology of screening. To really wrap our heads around how CVs work in the real world, we're pulling data from three specific studies focused on the Portuguese labor market. They looked at candidates applying for entry-level business and administrative roles. Now, to grasp what these researchers were actually measuring, we need to talk about a concept called perceived employability. See, when a recruiter looks at a piece of paper, they aren't just mechanically reading text, they're making psychological leaps. Perceived employability is an evaluator's subjective perception regarding your actual chances of getting and keeping a job. So think of your CV not as a clear window into your soul, but rather like a mirror. It actually reflects the evaluator's own expectations, biases, and assumptions right back at them, rather than serving as a perfect reflection of your true objective abilities. And you know what makes this research so incredibly compelling? It's who was doing the looking. Across these three studies, researchers didn't just grab a bunch of university students in a lab environment. No, they sampled over 900 actual working adults from diverse sectors across Portugal. Many of these folks possess active, real-world recruitment experience. This is a massive deal because it vastly increases the generalizability of these findings to the actual labor market. You are quite literally getting a glimpse into the minds of the exact people who act as the gatekeepers to your career. Moving on to Section 2, grades versus extracurriculars, busting the balance myth. So we are always told we need to be well-rounded, right? But I really want you to ask yourself, can joining the university debate club or maybe playing a campus sport realistically save a modest GPA? Well, let's dive right into this first myth. The researchers compared several fictitious business graduate profiles. Let's pit two of them head-to-head. Candidate A has a modest GPA, but their CV is just packed with high extracurricular activities. They were in all the clubs, they played the sports. Then we have Candidate B. Candidate B has a stellar, super high GPA, but absolutely zero extracurriculars. If you're an evaluator looking at these two for an entry-level job, who do you think is more suitable?
The results were incredibly decisive and, honestly, maybe a bit brutal for those relying on their vibrant campus life. Sorry to all the ultimate Frisbee captains out there. The hard reality is that academic performance heavily dominates job suitability. The study revealed the surprising truth that a candidate with high academic performance and absolutely no extracurriculars actually beats out someone with a modest GPA and tons of extracurriculars. It's fascinating how these profiles ended up ranking. Now, obviously, the best possible scenario, the absolute gold standard, is having a high GPA combined with extracurriculars. But coming in hot, right below that, is the high GPA with no extracurriculars. The researchers noted that while, yes, extracurriculars absolutely boost an evaluator's perception of your personal organization and time management skills, they simply cannot compensate for poor academic performance when it comes to sheer job suitability. Basically, extracurriculars are a bonus, they are not a substitute for the grades. Which brings us to Section 3, the internship illusion. Does destination matter? So many students bend over backwards, sometimes spending thousands of dollars to secure an optional or facultative internship during their studies. But this brings up a super common question. Does an international internship, say, flying off to the UK for the summer, actually give you a significant edge over just staying domestic in your home country? The general assumption is usually that going abroad shows serious initiative, a global perspective, and just makes your CV inherently more valuable, right? Well, the data tells a slightly different story. When mapping out international versus domestic internships, there is absolutely no statistically significant difference in perceived job suitability or estimated starting salary. The evaluator honestly doesn't care where you did the internship. However, and this is a big however, having no internship at all severely penalized candidates across the board. The experience itself is the signal they're looking for, not the fancy passport stamp.
And this dynamic brilliantly illustrates the intersection of gender and experience. The researchers actually found a really strong interactive effect here. Male candidates who completed an internship scored the absolute highest in both job suitability and their projected starting salary. Meanwhile, female candidates who did not complete an internship were penalized the most. The researchers pointed out that this perfectly aligns with early career pay gaps. So, the takeaway? Lacking an internship hurts everyone, for sure, but it hurts women entering the workforce significantly more.
Section 4. Demographics and Discrimination, the Intersection of Identity.
If the CV really is a mirror for subjective inferences, how exactly do evaluators react to demographics? Well, this next study explores the complex web of gender, education level, and national origin on a CV specifically tailored for an entry-level accounting clerk role. The researchers set up a highly intersectional analysis. They tested male versus female profiles. They tested higher education degrees versus vocational training. And crucially, they tested national origin using typical surnames. So they used a Portuguese name representing the local majority, a British name for a high-status European minority, and a Chinese name representing a non-European minority. To keep things fair and isolate the impact of the name itself, all these candidates were presented as having local residence and local academic credentials.
The findings here were incredibly revealing and honestly somewhat optimistic. The researchers stated, quote, "In the European context, bias can be avoided once the resume reports local academic credentials." End quote. What they found was that when foreign-named applicants, both British and Chinese, showcased local education and local language proficiency, that expected hiring hesitation against minorities pretty much disappeared entirely. Evaluators essentially saw them as part of the in-group purely because of their local schooling. So instead of being driven by national origin preferences, the evaluators were actually driven by two incredibly powerful premiums. First up is the education premium. Higher education candidates were strongly preferred across all origins and genders, easily outperforming those with vocational training. And get this, that was true even though the accounting clerk role didn't strictly require a university degree. The second is a gender premium. Female candidates were actually favored and rated higher for interpersonal and job skills in this specific gender-neutral role. So these two premiums, education and gender, consistently trumped national origin in the minds of the evaluators.
Finally, we've made it to Section 5, crafting the perfect signal. By understanding the actual psychology of the people reading these documents, we can essentially engineer a CV that triggers all the right inferences. Based on this empirical data from over 900 working adults, here is your blueprint for building the ultimate CV signal. Step 1, prioritize your academic performance above all else. A high GPA is literally your strongest armor. Step 2, secure a faculty internship. It honestly doesn't matter if it's down the street or across the globe, just get the experience so you avoid that massive non-intern penalty. Step 3, if you belong to a minority group, make sure to place your local credentials and language proficiencies front and center to neutralize any in-group preferences. And finally, Step 4, absolutely add extracurriculars to show distinctiveness and time management, but never, ever use them as a crutch for bad grades. Now, you might be wondering, why does mastering this signal matter so much? Well, because 66% of total European Union employment comes from small and medium enterprises. Think about that. These aren't faceless algorithms scanning your resume. They are the exact types of everyday working adults that were sampled in these studies. They're managers, supervisors, and HR generalists who are making rapid, highly subjective inferences about your entire potential based on just a few sheets of paper. So I'll leave you with this final thought. We've seen the data. We know that everything from your GPA to a local diploma completely alters the psychological perception of your employability. If your CV is really just a mirror, reflecting an evaluator's subjective expectations and inferences right back at them, what exactly is your mirror reflecting right now? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and I really hope this helps you craft a signal that cuts right through the noise.